Right friends, welcome back to Learning Space, and as I have already announced previously, today we are going to deliberate on Gs3 paper. Last week we deliberated on Gs2 paper, and let me remind you, we started looking at the mains examination only from this year, and from last year we started editorial discussions, but seriously we started looking at mains paper only from this year. And in this context, I would like to tell you, I am taking the questions only to explain you in what context, that means under what circumstances such type of question is asked, right. So, to look at the mind of UPSC, that is one aspect, and the second aspect is through our discussions, where do we stand, where do we, that means where we erred, that means what was our detailed discussion and what is the question asked here, then how to correlate all these things, because a direct question may not be asked in UPSC and sometimes some twist will be there, and in this context I am going to deliberate from that perspective, right. And last week we deliberated about certain aspects, that means in GS2 I explained you certain aspects when one looks at UPSC mains. The first one is, let me be brief on this, because in GS2 analysis I discussed for around 15-20 minutes on these aspects, and let me take 3 to 4 minutes on this. First one is, NCERT becomes inevitable to understand basic concepts of various terminology. 6th to 10th NCERT, please go through, that is the first point, and focus on entire syllabus. So, syllabus is very important because of the reason newspaper articles are coming, that means when you look at the UPSC syllabus, newspaper articles are pertaining to only certain topics of the syllabus. Certain topics are not covered in newspaper articles. So, therefore, please follow entire syllabus, and to tag with the syllabus, one should, or you can say one need to look at beyond newspapers also. Especially when you look at S&T, when you look at disaster, when you look at investment models, all those things you have to go beyond newspapers. And when you look at the current related aspects, around 60 to 70% are of course are coming from newspapers, but you have to go slightly beyond that. When you look at certain topics, that means what I want to say is certain topics, they are not being covered in the newspapers, and for those type of topics in science and technology, in disaster as well as internal security as well as investment models, and for such type of topics you have to look beyond newspapers, and that is the advice which I would like to give you. And if you look at the second important point, I told you last week also that read the views, that means read analysis, and after reading the analysis for 3-4 months, you see now migration is into focus. I am telling you with one example, migration is into focus because of the incidents taking place in Gujarat. So, migration is a big issue. It has got social implications, it has got economic implications, it has got implications for the internal security of the country. So, you have to look at it from all the dimensions, and while reading one article, it may not be possible to focus on all the dimensions. So, therefore, if you look at migration, read number of analysis articles, or you can say read number of editorial discussion pages pertaining to migration. After that, that means this issue will die down within the next 3-4 months, and once the issue dies down, then sit calmly, coolly, and write down 360-degree view by taking different facets of the issue. Then you can form in the mind some mind map with regard to how to tackle the issue. So, therefore, for any particular issue, whether you take minimum support prices, whether you take migration, whether you take any other issue like oil seeds, whatever the issue you take, have 360-degree view. That is very, very important. And initially you cannot form 360-degree view, and 360-degree view is possible only when you read number of articles with different facets, right, what we are doing in the editorial discussion. So, for next year what we will do is, for 2019 mains exam, here by combining all the articles whatever we discuss, by combining, that means by taking the salient points from different articles what we discuss in the newspapers, we will present mind map or 360-degree view before 2019 mains for several of the issues. That is what we are going to do for 2019, right. And the next issue is crystal clear clarity about current affairs. If you look at certain questions, it is not possible to write answers unless you have crystal clear clarity. Then read, analyze and form 360-degree view or mind map. GS1 is also increasingly becoming current related, and static questions sometimes revolves around the issues discussed in the recent past, and some of the static questions may have relevance to the recent past. Then don't excessively dependent on how the toppers wrote the exam, and for each and every topic have 360-degree view. That is what is important. Take each and every topic from now onwards, follow editorial discussions, you read number of articles, and before next year mains, that means you start that immediately after prelims. Immediately after prelims for 1 month, make 360-degree view or mind map on all the issues, right. That is how you have to go ahead, right. So, current affairs part from now onwards, that means from June 2018 onwards, follow the current affairs, and by the time you reach June 2019, 1 year of complete knowledge will be in your mind, and by using that knowledge make 360-degree view or mind maps, and that is essential to answer the mains questions. And one more thing is, at least for 10 out of 20 questions you should have ready-made answers before going to the examination hall. That means 10 questions will definitely come if you do proper analysis. That means if you do analysis and keep ready-made answers, you can write at least 10 questions straight away answers, and remaining 10 questions you have to think in the examination hall. So, your strategy should be 10 by 10. That means 10 questions you should have ready-made answer, and 10 questions are to be thought, or you can say are to be thought in the examination hall itself. Then analysis of various questions indicates some are general in nature and some require deeper analysis. So, therefore, 360-degree view or mind map becomes essential for each topic. And whenever any current event happens, dig further. Immediately you may not be able to dig, but over a period of time. Now, yesterday we discussed about amendments to Electricity Act. I told you that is the beginning, and in future during the next 3-4 months number of articles will appear, and please follow all the articles. Once that is completed, then write down 360-degree view on amendments to Electricity Act. That way if you follow, you can answer any type of question. Then second, let us take migration. Write down all the implications of migration in advance, not in the examination hall. Before, that means in advance, you should be having ready-made answers with 360-degree view as well as mind maps, right. So, at least 50% of the questions have the answers in advance, and there it becomes difficult to think and write. So, therefore, 50% of the questions you should have ready-made answers, right friends. This is the way how you have to go ahead. One is NCERT, newspaper analysis, and after completing analysis for few months, write down 360-degree view or mind map, right. For at least 50% of the questions, you should have ready-made answers. In the exam, you need not think much, and for remaining 50%, you may be required to think. So, that should be the strategy. Let us look at the first one. Here, let us look at Gs3 questions. Very, very simple question. It looks quite difficult, but very, very simple. Here you see, access to affordable, reliable, sustainable and modern energy. Affordable, it must be affordable, it must be reliable, then sustainable, then modern energy. That is essential to achieve SDGs. Comment on the progress made in India in this regard. Classic question, very easy to write. What is the progress made in recent times? That is Deen Dayal Upadhyay Gram Jyoti Yojana. That is electrification of all the villages. That means here reliable electricity. Then next one is Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana. So Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana, you can take affordable. Then Kusum. Kusum is sustainable. That is in fact solar pump sets for the agriculture. Then Ujala, that is keeping in mind energy conservation, and in future the bills will be reduced. And like that you can write down the points. The question looks difficult, but it is very simple question. Every one of you know about it, right? And access to affordable, reliable, sustainable and modern energy is essential to achieve SDGs. Absolutely correct. What are SDGs? SDGs, all of you are familiar, this eliminating from hunger, then poverty, all those things are there. So for them what is required? Affordable energy is the affordable energy access is required. And what are the government steps? Government is taking number of steps recent times. Deen Dayal Upadhyay Gram Jyoti Yojana, Ujala, Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana, Kusum, all these things you have to narrate. But the important point is to remember all these things, to bring out all these things in the examination hall within 5-6 minutes. So that type of questions, try to frame well in advance. Whenever you are thinking, whenever you are, that means as a group, whenever you are thinking, try to pose such type of questions. Then your UPSC becomes easy. Second one is comment on the important changes introduced in respect of the long-term capital gains tax. And this is under the syllabus government budgeting. Budget is around 7-8 months old. Probably students may forget, but budget is very important. One question is expected in the budget. And we discussed in the editorial discussion on 6th February with regard to the question which we have posed is this: examine the reasons behind the introduction of long-term capital gains tax and critically examine its implications. But in the editorial we have not discussed about dividend distribution tax, right? But this is about union budget, and union budget is very important when you look at prelims as well as mains, and the question may not be that difficult. Only thing is it becomes around 7-8 months old by the time you write mains examination. But have thorough examination, or you can say have thorough analysis of union budget both from prelims perspective and mains perspective. This was what we have discussed on 6th February. You may not recollect also unless you revise. And one more point is we have not discussed about dividend distribution tax here. Probably we might have discussed in the budget session, but not in the editorial, and people normally do not expect this type of dividend distribution tax will be asked in the mains examination, right? So therefore UPSC examination you should be ready for any type of situation or eventuality, right? Then third one is, what do you understand by minimum support price? Of course this we have discussed number of times, and each one of you probably may be knowing about it, but you see how the question is asked. How will MSP rescue the farmers from the low income trap? Here you see the low income trap. How this word is coined? There is some resemblance with low equilibrium trap. Low equilibrium trap we have seen in economic survey, and here probably this has got some resemblance to using that word low equilibrium trap. We discussed about low equilibrium trap. So low income trap, how to infer this? You can easily infer if you understand low equilibrium trap, and how this MSP will benefit, will bring out farmers from low income trap. MSP, after hearing number of lectures on MSP, probably students may be in a position to write this well, right? But only important aspect one should quote is the e-marketing, that means e-NAMs should function effectively, and at the same time procurement mechanisms is very important. Government should look at procurement mechanisms to bring farmers from low income trap. Mere announcement of this minimum support price will not benefit the farmers. You have to write this way: mere announcement will not benefit, but what is required? That means they can be brought out of low income trap, but you can add what are the essentials to bring them out of low income trap, right. This is in fact not that difficult question, and we posed most difficult questions in the editorial discussions, and this is very recent origin we discussed in July. Then examine the role of supermarkets in supply chain management of fruits, vegetables and food items. Very, very simple question, but here how does it eliminate number of intermediaries? We discussed in number of situations about the forward linkages, backward linkages, and at the same time, of course, 1 year ago we discussed about radical steps to transform agriculture, and here the role of supermarkets in supply chain management. And because of the supermarkets, what happens, they in fact they will facilitate the establishment of forward and backward linkages, right. So we discussed how this supply chain functions. This I have taken from the editorial of last year, and at the same time we also deliberated this backward linkage, forward linkage, what is the difference, and all these things we deliberated, but it is quite old and straight away we have not discussed. During a number of occasions we discussed different perspectives, how UPSC, you have to view the UPSC. Here this type of question we have not discussed, but we deliberated number of other issues, and ultimately if you infer those issues you can answer this question, but inferring in the examination hall within 5-6 minutes is the real difficulty. So therefore the lesson to be learnt from UPSC is not only one type of question. When we are posing one type of question based on one editorial, students should try to develop framing different types of questions well in advance. In the examination, here what happens, to write answer for this, you have to infer, your mind should search from different sources. So to come out of that problem, what students can do is, while you are discussing certain issue, let us take here, we discussed about supply chain. There itself you try to frame number of questions, different types of questions, so that your mind is able to anticipate well in advance, right. So reading more and more for UPSC is essential, no doubt. I am telling this statement after going through UPSC pattern. Reading more and more, no doubt essential, but spend some time daily, at least 1 hour or so, to probe yourself. That means you have to go much beyond whatever you are reading, that is UPSC Mains. So for UPSC Mains, reading is one aspect, and second thing is inferring the knowledge, how you infer the knowledge. And in the examination hall, to infer the knowledge is really difficult. To infer the knowledge is really difficult in the examination hall within 5-6 minutes. So therefore that inference, that type of different types of questions, all these things should be in your mind well in advance. So you can start probing from now onwards. Whenever you are coming across something, today migration is the issue, probe from different perspectives. What are its economic consequences? What are its social consequences? What are its consequences when you look at slums in urban areas? What are its consequences when you look at the trust deficit? What are its consequences when one looks at insider-outsider syndrome? Like that, you have to probe more and more, study more, I am not denying that. But some students are going towards reading more. But more than that, read more, I am not denying that. But the point to note here is you have to probe yourself. You have to think laterally. For that, you have to spend some time. Time is very important. Most of the students are in fact losing the game because most of the time they are spending only for reading. Right? So that may be applicable for examinations like banking. But when you look at civil services examination, then what is important is probing, or you can say lateral thinking, innovative thinking. These are all very much essential and start from now onwards, right? So the next one is Bose-Einstein statistics. This is the static question, but why it is asked? It is asked because this year we are commemorating 125th birth anniversary of famous physicist Sachendranath Bose. In fact, on January 1, we had one article in the Hindu, and it talks about 125th birth anniversary commemorations started. His birthday falls on January 1, and he was born in 1894, and his name is very much in the news when CERN discovered Higgs boson few years ago, and that is one aspect. And why this question is asked is because of 125th birth anniversary. That is the important aspect, right? So this question looks static, but it has got some relevance with this 125th birth anniversary celebrations. We have not discussed this in the editorial. Then this also we have not discussed in the editorial. And what are the impediments in disposing huge quantities of discarded solid wastes which are continuously being generated? How do we remove safely the toxic wastes that are accumulating in our habitable environment? How to remove toxic waste? And this type of question also requires initial probing. Friends, please sit together, try to pose such type of questions. This is very general question, but it is very difficult to write in the examination hall. Then what is wetland? Wetland, simple question, all of you are familiar. Explain the Ramsar concept of wise use in the context of wetland conservation. Give 2 examples. Why this is asked? This is asked because of there is some reason for it. I am explaining you the reason. This Dhrupad Jyoti Ghosh, public sanitation engineer of Kolkata, died, and in that context we had one editorial in The Hindu in March, this year March, and this talks about Kolkata is ecologically subsidized city. We discussed in the editorial on 8th March. Kolkata is called ecologically subsidized city. Enumerate the reasons. This is nothing but wise use of the wetlands. That's why Kolkata is ecologically subsidized city. This is a very good interesting article. We had enough discussion in the editorial, and in this context this question was asked. Wise use of wetlands. Probably the origin for this question is the death of the person from Kolkata who is associated with this ecologically subsidized city because of East Kolkata wetlands. It is purifying the sewage, right? In that context this question is asked, and we deliberated in detail in the editorial itself. Then Sikkim is the organic state. This is very general question. Many of you may be able to write. This is a simple question, straightforward question. Sikkim is organic state. What are the ecological and economic benefits of organic state? Right, straightforward question. And we discussed in the month of March. In fact, Amrita Madam produced this organic farming in S&T Health and Environment. Right. So what is organic farming? Components of organic farming, all those things were deliberated in the module presented by Amrita Madam in March. And why this is asked is straightforward. Organic state is a Sikkim, and when news are coming with regard to organic state, with regard to ODF, with regard to ODF plus, try to drill down further. What is important is you have to dig down further. Now we are talking about ODF plus and Delhi. Probably one question may come next year about ODF plus. What are the challenges in ODF plus? And a question may come, what are the challenges with regard to Swachh Bharat mission? We recently deliberated about that. So like that, so there is some origin for UPSC question, right? Then China-Pakistan economic corridor. This is straightforward question, is viewed as cardinal subset of One Belt One Road. It is part of One Belt One Road. Give brief description of CPEC and enumerate the reasons why India distanced itself from the same, right? And we discussed in the editorial in the month of March 18. In that editorial we deliberated, and of course CPEC we deliberated number of times. It is a straightforward question and you can easily write in 150 words for this. And India's objections, the primary objection is a sovereignty issue is there. You can elaborate on that, right? And here we have discussed what are the CPEC investments. That means it has got Gwadar port, it has got road and rail. In fact, these are the details which we have taken from the editorial of March 2018. So, like that. And what is the ground reality? Here CPEC does not recognize POK to be Pakistan's sovereign territory also. That means this we have deliberated in some other context. That is why these things are appearing like this. Then left wing extremism, we discussed this in the editorial also, why this is asked, and the previous question CPEC is expected, and why this left wing extremism question is asked. In fact, the government reduced the number of districts affected by left wing extremism, and in that context left wing extremism is showing downward trend, but still affects many parts of the country, and briefly explain the government of India's approach to counter the challenges. And this is expected question. Why this is expected is left wing extremism is on wane, it is on the reducing trend. In this context, number of articles appeared, and the most recent in August itself, right. So, critically examine whether the recent successes, this is what we have posted in the editorial, right. And here we discussed what is the action plan, one is national policy and action plan is there, important aspects, these things we deliberated. Then how are the principles followed by Niti Aayog? This is in fact anticipated, expected question, and many of you may be having answers for this. And Planning Commission and Niti Aayog. Niti Aayog is basically think tank, like that. In fact, in September itself on 21st, there was in fact a good article with regard to Niti Aayog, what is doing, what Niti Aayog is doing. And this question probably easy to answer, because in place of Planning Commission, Niti Aayog came, and many of you are familiar with Niti Aayog activities, what it is doing. And Planning Commission, of course, some of you may not be familiar with it, but in news articles probably you might have read about Planning Commission's centralized approach and all those things, and you can write up to the maximum extent this question easily. And if you write the, or you can say if you know the familiarity of Niti Aayog, and you can easily discard the Planning Commission activities, keeping in mind Niti Aayog. That means when you know the merits of Niti Aayog, you can easily link it with Planning Commission, right. Anyhow, this is one recent article is there in the Hindu on 21st September this year, and number of points were there from that article. Then here, how would the recent phenomena of protectionism and currency manipulations affect macroeconomic stability? This is expected question, very, very expected question. Here you see, I have gone in different direction. I posed one question in Q&A, and this I looked at the Turkey-Argentina crisis and vulnerabilities faced by emerging markets, and in Q&A I asked one question about the vulnerability of India, macroeconomic vulnerability of India in this context. But the question you see, question is different. Question is asked in the context of protectionism and currency manipulation, and this we deliberated in the editorials also with regard to currency manipulation and protectionism, how it is going to affect, and here how it would affect macroeconomic stability of India is the question. And this question has gone in different direction, and the important aspect is I could not visualize this question before the examination, but I could visualize this question, and they are somewhat related, what I mean to say. And of course, this aspect we discussed in the editorial number of times, currency manipulation and protectionism. And the important aspect is the same mantra, whenever any current event happens, have 360-degree view, try to frame the question on your own, try to pose the question, try to get the answer, right. That is the important aspect. This we looked at macroeconomic stability in the context, or you can say the vulnerabilities of emerging markets. Then National Horticulture Mission, here you see, when such type of missions are becoming 5-year-old, 3-year-old, 10-year-old, then a question is expected in UPSC. This we have not discussed in the editorial. and a question is expected, how far it is a successful or failure. So, 1 or 2 questions are normally expected in UPSC, and you see Niti Aayog question is asked. Niti Aayog is more than 3-year-old, and now question on National Horticulture Mission, and here it is talking about how far has it succeeded in increasing the income of the farmers. So, for the missions, for the programs, once they complete 2 years, 3 years, then you should have critical appraisal, very important. People may forget about them, but UPSC will not forget about them, very important aspect. And Uday scheme, probably critical appraisal may come next year with regard to Uday. Uday was brought to improve the financials of the discoms and how far it is succeeded. Such type of question is expected in UPSC. So, to answer UPSC questions, your mind should revolve around different directions, not one direction. And that is why I told you, spend some time to think yourself, right? Then, has the recent emphasis on certain crops brought about the changes in cropping patterns in recent past? Elaborate emphasis on millets, and this is an expected question. Why? Because of 2 reasons. Government is giving emphasis on millets. 2018 is designated. That is one reason, and there is a lot of emphasis on millets in recent times. Second important aspect is the pulses turnaround. I told you number of times. In fact, I framed one question in Q&A 56, that is 12th module before mains examination. How the crisis in pulses was converted into opportunity. What the government has done to convert the crisis into opportunity. The first is the same thing. How has the emphasis on certain crops brought about changes in the cropping patterns? Indirectly it asked, right? And the second aspect is the emphasis on millets production. And here we discussed in the editorial on 26th June 18 about millets, and these two put together, a question is asked here. So, here for pulses, what was the long term strategy adopted? We discussed, and at the same time about nutrition security with regard to this millets, that is also discussed. And here advantages of millets are also given in that editorial. So, the current events are very important. Millets is in the news, pulses turnaround is in the news, right? The next one is why there is so much activity in the field of biotechnology in our country. Why this question is asked? This is asked because of this biopharma. This is the aspect pertaining to innovate in India. Innovate in India, that is to accelerate biopharmaceutical development in our country. And in fact, recently, that means around 4 or 5 months ago, an agreement was also signed with the World Bank. In that context, this question was asked, and this question is how the activity benefited the field of biopharma. Straight away, biopharma, if you are able to recollect this I3, innovate in India, you can emphasize on that. But unfortunately, no editorial appeared in recent times. We have not deliberated in the editorial. Probably this was discussed in PIB with regard to this I3, or you can say innovate in India. So, that is why I am telling you, each and every news item is important. Certain news items are not being covered extensively in the newspapers. This question, there is some logic for asking this question because of the agreement signed with the World Bank with regard to I3 in the month of April, May or so, right? That is why this question is asked. So, such type of things in future we will try to concentrate in the editorial, because this is in fact discussed in PIB, but merely by looking at PIB, you may not be able to write this answer for this question. So, more and more discussion is required in the editorials. Then the next one is, with growing energy needs, should India keep on expanding its nuclear energy program? And here facts and fears associated with nuclear energy. Friends, here we discussed this around 1.5 years ago. You may not remember this, and unfortunately, in fact, I am not claiming that we have taught. I am straightforward in this. though we covered 1.5 years ago, but how the students will remember. So therefore, each and every aspect is to be touched, and that aspect is to be revised at least in the current year. That means if you are writing 2019 exam, then in the year 2019 itself you have to revise the events, that means the aspects which are evergreen relevant. Here you see what the mistake we have done. We have deliberated in 2017 May. After that we have not brought it forward. This is very much important because nuclear energy question can be asked any time, and I taught in May 2017, and while teaching in May 2017 no student will remember and write in the examination in the month of September 18. So therefore, what the mistake we have done is this is to be revised. So such type of things please don't forget, right? So some are evergreen, and the previous question I told you about biopharma, that is asked because of the recent incident of signing agreement with World Bank, but this is evergreen subject. Nuclear energy is evergreen subject. Then how does biodiversity vary in India? This is about Biological Diversity Act. We have not taught in the editorial, and this act of 2002, that means here you see this is appraisal just like horticulture mission. So therefore, some of the questions, 2-3 questions will come. This is almost straightforward question. In your mind, if you have certain points, you can straight away write. If you don't have any points, you cannot write. So therefore, such type of things you can visualize well in advance. But one important aspect is some of the things are not appearing in the newspapers. This is one classic example. I have not taught in the editorial about this act for the past 1.5 years. So therefore, you have to go beyond newspapers when you look at the aspects of science and technology, disaster, all those things. Then this is about Sendai framework, India on disaster risk reduction. This is clearly explained by madam, and why this question is asked. Here various measures taken for disaster risk reduction. Here there is some catch is there in this question. What it is asking? What are the measures taken in India for disaster risk reduction before Sendai framework, after Sendai framework? But here you see, many of you may be aware about after Sendai framework. Many of you may ignore before Sendai framework. And here the 360-degree view comes into picture, right? Then data security. This is in fact in the news. What I have done is, in fact, I have done a mistake. I brought forward, that means we discussed one article, that means one editorial on the salient features of personal data protection bill, and I told you in the second part I am going to cover critical appraisal. I thought as it is still in the draft stage, a question may not be asked. That's why I deferred that lecture, but exactly that critical appraisal is asked in the examination. Critical appraisal is asked in the examination. So therefore, a lesson to be learned here is whenever any issue is in the draft stage also, question may be asked. Please do not ignore when something is in the draft stage, a question may be asked. Last one, this is about India's proximity to two of the world's biggest illicit opium growing states. How in fact they affect internal security concerns, and why this is asked? There is some logic behind it. The logic is Punjab. Here Punjab is vulnerable to drug trafficking. There are several news reports with regard to drugs in Punjab, and in that context there are several number of, or you can say there are several editorial discussions, and we discussed why Punjab is vulnerable for drug trafficking, but we have not gone too much into the question asked here. Here you see the question how it is asked. Here linkages between drug trafficking and gun running, money laundering and human trafficking, and here we have discussed only India is situated close to two of the world's biggest illicit opium growing states. That we discussed, but we have not gone into this aspect. That is the important aspect. Whenever something happens, have 360-degree view, right? So, big lesson from this question is, we concentrated on Punjab drug trafficking and we eliminated how the threat to the internal security is there as a whole. And in this discussion, we have discussed about the countries, right, and this opium producing countries, but we missed the aspect of how it affects India's internal security, right. So, there are several lessons to be learned and I gave you the hints each and every question when I am discussing. I hope this 40 minutes discussion will facilitate you to prepare well in the 2019 examination, for the 2019 examination. Right friends, last week we discussed GS2, this week we discussed GS3, and this is not to boast what we have taught. I am equally with you. That means some of the aspects were taught, some of the aspects could not be taught, and our mind has to think in different direction when one looks at UPSC examination. So, when the newspapers are writing something, we have to think about some other direction. The last question is one classic example. So, like that, for 2019 exam, we will certainly try to bring the best possible. And let me remind you, this is the first time we are looking at mains paper, and I hope we have done reasonably good job. This is not to boast that we have done everything, but we have done up to the extent possible. Those whoever are following learning space lectures for the past 1 year probably might have benefited a lot, and there are several lessons to be learned from this, and we will certainly try to improve upon whatever we have done this year, and 2019 certainly we will put forward the best possible for the student community. This is our wish, this is our goal, and students, please stay with the learning space, right? Have a nice day. Thank you.